Once there was a woodcutter with two children and their stepmother. The boy's name was Hansel, and the girl's name was Gretel. They lived so poorly that sometimes there was not even anything to eat. And then one evening he lay in bed, pondering how to feed the children further. His wife advised him to have children in the forest, light a fire, give a piece of bread each and leave them there, not all four of them die of hunger. But the woodcutter did not agree. And until then, his wife persuaded him that he finally agreed. And the children, because of hunger, also could not sleep and heard everything that their stepmother said to their father. And when the parents fell asleep, Hansel secretly rushed out of the house. The moon was shining brightly, and the white stones glittered like coins. Hansel pocketed as many of them as he could fit. Then he returned home and the children went to bed. In the morning, the stepmother came to the children, gave each of them a piece of bread, and they all went to the forest together. On the way, Hansel threw out white stones one by one. When they arrived at the clearing, my father began to light a fire. He ordered the children to sit near the fire and make sure that it didn't go out, while they and their stepmother would go for more firewood. They sat, tired, and fell fast asleep. When the children woke up, it was a dark night all around. And when a full month had risen in the sky, Hansel took his sister by the hand and went, looking for the way through the pebbles, which glittered like new coins, and showed them the way. They walked all night long, and at dawn they came to their father's house. Some time passed, and the children again heard how the stepmother one night began to beg their father to get rid of the children. He refused, but his wife did not want to listen to him. She cursed and expressed all sorts of reproaches to him. When the parents fell asleep, Hansel, like the last time, wanted to collect stones, but the stepmother locked the door and the boy could not leave the house. Early in the morning, the children were given a piece of bread each, even less than the previous time. On the way to the forest, Hansel shredded his piece in his pocket and threw the crumbs on the ground. The stepmother took them even further into the forest. Again a big fire was lit, and the father ordered the children to watch the fire while they and their stepmother chopped some more wood. When lunchtime came, Gretel shared her piece of bread with Hansel. And they fell asleep. We woke up when the dark night fell. And then a month came up, and they got together on their way, but they could not find a single crumbs, because thousands of birds fluttering in the forest had long been eating those crumbs. So the children walked for a very long time, but they could not get out of the forest. Suddenly, the road led them to the hut. Coming closer, the children saw that the house was all built of bread and biscuits, and the windows were made of pure sugar. Hansel reached up and broke off a piece of the roof, while Gretel went to the window and began gnawing at its windows. And then the door in the hut opened wide, and the old woman came out, leaning on a crutch. Hansel and Gretel were so scared that they even dropped their tidbits from their hands. And the old woman was kind and invited them to her hut. There was already abundant food on the table: milk, cookies, apples, and nuts. After dinner, the old woman made 2 clean beds for the children, and Hansel and her sister thought they were in heaven. But the old woman only pretended to be affectionate, but in fact she was an evil witch, who built her bread hut for this purpose in order to lure children. Early in the morning, while the children were sleeping, she took Hansel and put him in a small cage. And she ordered her sister to do everything that the wicked witch demanded of her. The old woman decided to fatten the boy in order to eat him later. So Gretel began to cook the most delicious food for Hansel, and she herself got nothing but leftovers. Some time passed, and the boy did not get fat. Then the old woman did not want to wait any longer, and decided to cook and eat Hansel. She ordered Gretel to light the stove and apply water. When the stove warmed up, the old woman ordered her to climb into the stove and see if it was hot enough. So she wanted to push the girl into the fire and bake her. But Gretel knew what was on her mind. She said that she did not know how to get in there, and asked the witch to show herself. The old woman got angry and climbed into the oven. Then Gretel pushed her and slammed the shutter behind the witch. Wow, how terribly the old woman hauled them. Gretel, meanwhile, rushed to Hansel and opened the cage. Having freed their brother, they went to the witch's room, in which there were boxes of pearls and precious stones in all corners, filled their pockets with them, and went home. For several days the children were looking for their way back. The forest seemed more and more familiar, and at last they saw their father's house in the distance. How glad he was to see his children alive. Hansel and Gretel poured on the floor all the pearls and gems they had taken from the witch. There was no need to think about food. And they began to live, laugh, and rejoice. And the father drove the evil stepmother out of the house. Lemuel Gulliver was born into the family of a poor English landowner. The boy was the third of 5 sons. At the age of 14, he became an apprentice to a famous London doctor, and then got a job as a surgeon on a ship.
Cool.
For 6 years Gulliver traveled to different countries, observed the customs of the natives, and even studied their language. And so Gulliver set off on another voyage on the ship Antelope. But did not have time to pass even halfway, as the ship fell into a terrible storm. The storm hit the ship against the rocks, and the sailors jumped overboard in horror. And only Gulliver managed to get into the boat. He was carried for hours on the waves, and soon by a miracle the boat washed ashore. But Gulliver was so exhausted by the storm that as soon as he stepped on the ground, he immediately fell asleep on the nearby lawn. The rays of the first sun awakened Gulliver.
Oh, no!
He tried to get up, but realized that he could not move. His arms, legs, and even his hair were tied to the ground with a net of small ropes. Suddenly something tickled Gulliver's chest. He raised his head and saw a little man the size of a finger. It was the king of the Lilliputians. He gave the order, and then thousands of small arrows, like needles, began to stab Gulliver's body. The prisoner immediately realized that it was better to submit. He showed by signs that he was hungry and thirsty. Then, by order of the king, food was brought to him. More than 100 natives climbed the stairs to Gulliver's mouth, pouring baskets of fruit, bread, and meat on him. When Gulliver ate everything, he was taken to the capital on a specially made platform. The prisoner was placed in a huge temple, chained to his left leg with many miniature chains.
No!
It was the largest room in the entire country, but even into it the giant had to walk on all fours. At a meeting of the Lilliputians, the king ordered to provide Gulliver with a staff of 600 servants. They sewed a suit for the prisoner and even a bedding for miniature mattresses.
Nice.
And over time, the king was convinced that the giant is kind and therefore released him. Gulliver traveled a lot around the country, studied the customs and language of the Lilliputians, and even participated in their holidays and parades. Once, while communicating with the king, Gulliver learned that Lilliputia was at war with the empire of Blefuscu, located on a neighboring island. The reason for the contention was that the Lilliputians could not agree with the Blefuscans on how to properly break the eggs. The Lilliputians split them from the sharp end, and the Blefuscans from the blunt. And now rumors reached the king of Lilliput that the enemy had prepared a fleet and was about to attack. Then the emperor asked for help from Gulliver, and he willingly agreed. And so, under cover of night, Gulliver took long ropes and swam to the enemy ships. He tied a rope to each ship and dragged them to the shores of Lilliput. The guards, who were the only ones on the ship, jumped into the sea and started swimming away from the giant. So Gulliver completely disarmed the opponents and received the most honorable title in the kingdom for this. For this, the courtiers disliked Gulliver. They began to weave intrigues against him, and soon the king himself accused the giant of high treason. Rumors spread throughout the kingdom. And Gulliver learned that at the Privy Council, it was decided to execute him.
Oh no!
Therefore, that very night, Gulliver made his way to the shore, where he left his broken boat. Having quickly repaired the boat, the giant left the country of the Lilliputians in a hurry, taking with him 6 small live cows, 2 bulls, and the same number of sheep and rams. Gulliver sailed on the ocean for a long time until he noticed an English ship.
Yes!
On it, he safely got home. But, as it turned out, This was just the beginning of Gulliver's adventures.